Hey everyone, Dave here with another Blu-ray collection update video. This is the first one from the months of October, November 2022. And in this video, we're taking a look at a couple of delayed titles from the 21st wave of Imprint films. Bit of an interesting one here, so let's get into it. So, as I said at the top right there, we're going to be taking a look at a couple of delayed Imprint titles. Now, these ones were supposed to have come out with Wave 21. That was a huge wave to begin with anyway. There were like 11 or 12 other titles in that same wave. So I think some people were probably a little bit relieved that they were holding a couple of titles off. But yeah, these have been delayed for about 2 or 3 months now. We're up to Wave 23. That's the next wave that is supposed to be coming out. By the time I'm filming there, by the time I upload this, that wave may have already come out, but at the time that I'm filming, it hasn't come out just yet. I haven't got my hands on them, so we're putting them on the next Imprint video. They were supposed to come out at the end of October, but now they're coming out in the beginning of November. So I think because of these 3 delayed titles, there's been a little bit of a shift of the entire kind of the scheduling there. But that's okay. Now, these 3 titles right here, because they were delayed for some reason or another, the bonus features that had been announced to be on these discs were announced about a month or so ago not to be included on these releases after all. So whether there was maybe a licensing issue with the bonus features that delayed the pressing of the discs, we see this a lot with releases where the company will make a press release and down the bottom in fine print it says something like, "This is correct at the time of the press release, but things can change. You know, we might add special features, we might remove some." This happens quite often. Unfortunately, though, that means that these 3 discs right here are the first 3 bare bones Imprint releases, which is a little bit disappointing, particularly as the regular retail price on these ones has not budged. You would think that maybe they would knock maybe $5 off them or something like that, but no, these are the exact same price as the previously released Imprint issues, which are usually loaded with bonus features. Usually they include new bonus features and stuff like that. There was some really good stuff coming that was supposed to be included on these, a few documentaries and stuff I was really looking forward to seeing, but unfortunately they are not present here. Hopefully, maybe these will be repurposed into other sets further down the line. I'd be perfectly okay with that. Again, I don't have any more details than that. All we know is that these were delayed. They're finally out there on the market right now. Just a little bit disappointing that they are bare bones, but other than that, let's take a look at the movies. That's what we're here to talk about. First up, it's Imprint number 83, I Am the Law from 1938. Law Professor John Lindsay, portrayed by Edward Robinson, is named Special Prosecutor, assigned to put an end to gangster activity in the city. Civil leader Bill, who got Lindsay his job, is involved in the rackets and wants to control the investigation. Everyone Lindsay's office persuades to testify turns up dead. This stars Edward G. Robinson, Barbara O'Neill and John Beale. It's the first Blu-ray release of the film worldwide. So you all know that I love my crime dramas from the 20s, 30s, 40s, that whole film noir era. This one, of course, stars the great Edward G. Robinson, who is such a staple of these crime films from the era. This film is not a noir, so it's a little bit different to anything that you would usually see Robinson in. And also, the thing that sets this one apart is the fact that Robinson is actually playing a good guy here. Robinson, of course, was usually seen playing the gangsters. He was one of those guys who was always in the role of the bad guy. He always played, you know, like the leader of the racketeers in these great film noirs. So this one's kind of interesting to see Edward G. Robinson in kind of a polar opposite role to what you would normally see him in. And for me, I thought that was quite cool, particularly, again, as someone who loves this kind of genre, this era. I've seen a lot of Edward G. Robinson's work, and to discover something that is a little bit different, I think is really, really cool. Unfortunately, the movie is a little bit tedious. It's only like 80 minutes long, so it's like just under an hour and a half, but it does feel very long. It's a movie that is very, very talky. A lot of it is like single shots of people delivering these big, grandiose kind of monologues. It's almost very stagey, very theatrical. I think the way that it's put together is really, really great, but again, it is a little bit tedious because it feels very long for its length, for an 80-minute movie. It feels very long because not a lot happens. There's some great tension in here, there's some great suspense and stuff like that, but it's never anything that really has you gripped on the edge of your seat. There's some fun fight sequences in here as well, but they are just so stagey that they're over the top and kind of you can't help but laugh at them. At the end of the day, I thought this was really quite a good movie, but it is very slow, and if you're not particularly one who loves these kind of talky films, you might struggle with getting through this one. But again, I think this is worth checking out just to see Robinson's performance in this, because it is just so vastly different to really anything else that he did throughout his career. Well, most of his career anyway. The transfer on this one is absolutely terrific. It looks very beautiful. In fact, this whole wave of these 3 discs right here, I'm very, very impressed with, very pleased with. This comes up looking very crisp and very sharp. There is a lot of print damage in this too, kind of a lot of spotting and stuff every now and then. I think that's totally fine. Again, I always feel that particularly for these kinds of movies, it adds a little bit of atmosphere to the piece. They haven't gone through and scrubbed it down completely. They've left a little bit of that artifacting, that little print damage and stuff like that. It doesn't impede on the viewing experience. I feel like it adds a little bit of atmosphere to it and makes it feel a little bit grungier, which is great. In all, this is a pretty interesting curio, and if you're interested in this period of cinema, crime stuff, gangster flicks, all those kinds of movies, this is definitely one worth checking out. Next up, we've got imprint number 83, Storm Center from 1956. This one stars Bette Davis, Paul Kelly, and Kim Hunter. Directed and co-scripted by From Here to Eternity's Daniel Taradash, this reflection on rights and responsibilities of citizens was a timely response to anti-communist sentiment of the 1950s. A small-town librarian stands up to local pressure to remove a controversial book from the shelves, on principle, not out of sympathy for its perspective. We've got another pretty interesting one here. This one comes from the mid to late 1950s, starring the great Bette Davis. This one almost finds itself smack bang in the middle of her career, in fact. So I feel like this is a period of her career that I have not really seen a lot of. I've seen a lot of her really early stuff. I love her performances, you know, from the 20s, the 30s, the 40s. I think those movies are so great. As you kind of push towards the back end of her career, we're talking about the movies in the the late 70s, the 1980s, I felt that her performances got really hammy and over the top and melodramatic, and I'm not a huge fan of kind of her later work. So this was an interesting one for me to kind of explore, because it kind of comes in the middle of these two eras where I really love the stuff over here, really don't like the stuff from over here. That said, Storm Center is another fairly tedious movie. We are talking about, again, middle 50s, late 50s, where we've come out of the war, and spawning out of the war, we have all these other kind of socio-political things coming up. People have become a lot more kind of insecure. Politics has become a lot more revolutionized. People are paranoid. You know, you have that communist scare going through Hollywood where everyone's a communist, you're pointing the fingers at everyone, and everyone is just so frightened that another war is going to break out. You've got things like McCarthyism coming to the forefront, and it's just such a really weird period in America. And as a result, as we see with all movies, the movies from this era are very much affected by the socio-political landscape. Now, this movie is the first movie or the first major movie anyway, that really tackled McCarthyism head on, tackled stuff like communism head on. So this, again, is a movie about a librarian who was asked to remove a book from the shelves of her library in exchange for the city council building a children's wing in the library, which is something that she's wanted to build for a long time. The book in question is, of course, essentially a communist manifesto, and she refuses to remove it from the shelves. Not because she's a communist herself, but because she believes in free speech, and she believes that this is a text that is interesting, it is of interest to the people, not necessarily just to communists, but texts like this are often kind of really interesting texts that can give you a good insight into different pockets of politics. Now, essentially, she says she believes in this free speech. She thinks that people have the right to be able to research and read whatever they like. As a result, she gets fired from the library, and it opens up this whole kind of can of worms. People are really sad to see her go, and you get a lot of the townspeople kind of siding with her, but they don't want to side with her publicly because then they fear that they'll also be branded a communist as she is. And there's this real kind of grey line there about, you know, this kind of idea of free speech and all these kinds of things. Now, as you know, I'm not a huge fan of movies that are very, very political, particularly when it's like trying to make like a big political statement like this. I often do find them a little bit boring, a little bit tedious to sit through. Again, these movies are always very, very talky, and this one certainly is. But I actually thought this was quite interesting, again, particularly as this is a movie that is coming at the peak of this period of paranoia in the mid to late 1950s, where everyone is paranoid about communists. People are paranoid about Hollywood being overrun by spies, essentially. I think it's kind of interesting to see a interesting political angle on these socio-political kind of things that are going on at the time from a film from the time. There's kind of a lot of really kind of groundbreaking stuff in here. And in fact, the movie was a little bit controversial on release as well, because it kind of paints itself into a little bit of a grey area too, in that in some aspects, if you were watching the movie at the time, you could see this movie as like a pro-communist film or something like that, you know. So it's a very interesting kind of thing. In fact, this disc right here was supposed to include a feature documentary on the Hollywood 10, who were 10 filmmakers in Hollywood who were essentially blacklisted around this era because they were believed to be communists. They were just completely blacklisted and written off. There was supposed to be a feature-length documentary on this, narrated by the great John Huston. I was so excited to check this out. Would have been a really great addition to this collection right here, especially because it's essentially like a bonus movie that you get with this too. Unfortunately, it is not here. Very sad. I'm hoping that somewhere down the line they can find some way to repurpose that bonus. Bette Davis's performance is really great in here too, so if you're a fan of her, I think it's worth checking out just for her performance. But again, it's not a movie that I absolutely loved. Transfer here was great as well. I'm not going to sing praises to it. It's not like the greatest transfer I've ever seen. Again, it's what I would call your kind of standard run-of-the-mill back catalogue studio release. It's just kind of like, it's an old movie that pulls up looking really quite good, but nothing really special. And finally, we've got imprint number 156, Golden Boy from 1939. Newcomer William Holden became an overnight sensation in the role of a young violinist who turns to boxing and finds himself torn between his two occupations, especially when seductive Stanwyck slinks into his life. Golden Boy packs just as big a punch today as it did when it came out in 1939, widely considered the greatest movie year ever. This one stars William Holden, Barbara Stanwyck, Adolphe Menjou, and Lee J. Cobb. Now we are talking Golden Boy. Has to be my favorite film out of this set right here. Really, really, really love this one. Late 1930s drama, sports film that really focuses on the human psyche. All the things that I really, really love in a film are right here. I thought this one was just so great. This one focuses on the inner struggle of this character played by William Holden as he grapples between whether he wants to be a fighter or a lover, a boxer or a musician. His family is pushing him to go one direction, then he meets this girl that he loves and she kind of pushes him in another direction, tells him, make your own mind up. It's a story about this person who has to grow into himself and find his own way in life. And as so many movies from this era it's a very, very sad movie as well. There's a lot of heartbreak in here, but there's a lot of love as well. And then my favorite kind of love stories where it's kind of, it's a tragic love, a tragic story. I love tragedies. This is a really beautiful movie and it is shot gorgeously as well. The cinematography on this is terrific. It's almost kind of film noir in nature. You've got a lot of really great blacks and like shadow detail and stuff like that. It is a absolute stunner of a movie, and this HD transfer right here is beautiful. The movie has been restored absolutely beautifully. There is no print damage here whatsoever that I could see. It's very crisp, but it has this terrific, terrific grain field on it as well. It just looks pure. Look, as you know, I'm like a touch and go fan of Barbara Stanwyck. Some of her stuff I really, really love. Some of her stuff I don't. Again, I feel like it's the same thing with Bette Davis, is that the earlier the performance, the more likely I am to really like it. I love the stuff she did earlier in her career, and I think this is possibly, outside of Preston Sturges's incredible film, again from I think the early 1940s, The Lady Eve, this is probably my favorite Barbara Stanwyck performance, aside from the Lady Eve, which I just adore. But yeah, she is terrific in this movie. She delivers a really impassioned performance, and she is just so graceful and so elegant on the screen. I just love watching her at work. And William Holden, holy moly. We are so used to seeing the 1950s performances of William Holden, you know, the kind of action man, or, you know, something like Sabrina with Audrey Hepburn and Humphrey Bogart, but so used to seeing him in the kind of the action roles, the kind of more aged, world-weary kind of gruff guy. This is very young William Holden, his very first film role ever, and in fact, he is so unrecognizable in this film. So unrecognizable. Like, if I did not know, and in fact, I was waiting for William Holden to come into the movie and then realized, hang on a minute, that's him right there. He's so young here and he just looks so different. He's completely unrecognizable, and his performance is incredible here too. He delivers such a great, especially as a debut performance. This is probably one of the greatest debut performances of an actor ever. One of the greatest ever. If you're being really picky with what you're picking up from this collection or whatever, this is my highest tip of the top recommendation of these three films right here. I adored this, and this is definitely one I'm going to be revisiting probably numerous times throughout the rest of my life. I can't wait to watch it again. But at that brings us to the end of this video right here. Again, very small wave, only 3 titles. These were delays from a couple of months ago, and as I said, as a domino effect, the October titles have been delayed a little bit, but again, I think there's a month coming up, it's either December or January, where there's not going to be any imprint titles at all, so it's going to be good on everyone's wallets, everyone's going to be happy. But until then, there are a bunch more videos I'll be pumping out over the month of November. I've got the latest releases from Umbrella to take a look at, latest release from keeks.com.au, we've got imprint titles to take a look at, and I'm not sure if we've got anything from Random Space Media this month, I'm not too sure, but there will be a couple more videos coming out over this month, so as always, keep your eye on the channel for those ones. As always, thanks for watching, I'll see you on the next one, take it easy.